Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, my brothers. Today I'm going to talk to you about two people. I'm going to talk to you about Michael George Vivash, who was born Christian, brought up in a Christian household, who was an altar boy and a choir boy. And I'm going to tell you about his life. And then I will talk to you about the man that stands before you today, whose name is Haji Mohammed Abdullah Zubair Vivash, and touch on what brought about that change. As I said, I was brought up in a Christian household, but the household was a very violent household. My father, who was a chronic alcoholic, was a very violent man. And when people ask me about my childhood, all I can remember about my childhood is the fear that I had of my father. The fear that I had of my father whenever I saw him. The beatings that I got from my father. These beatings were constant. But these beatings were moulding Michael. Because I became hard. I became dispassionate. And I thought only of myself. And I started to isolate myself from society. So the fact is that I became a product of the environment that I was living in. That I became what is known as the bully. At school, I took great delight. Anybody that I disliked, or anybody that I thought didn't fit in, or anybody else that was different, as a typical school bully, I would pick on them. I would beat them up. So this is the life that I was living as a child. And then coming home. And because of this, and because I was brought up in a religious school, which is very, very hard, you know, the beatings there were manifested by the priests, you know, and by the nuns. I went to a Catholic school. So I was having the beatings at home, I was having the beatings at school. And this was just hardening me. To the point that when I used to get beatings from my father, I would still myself, I would make myself determined not to cry, which would make these beatings harder. And this made Michael become a very, very hard person. And it got to the point that at the age of 15, or 14, just on 14, just before I turned 15, after another beating, I got tired of that. And I ran away from home. And I lived in a place called Adelaide in South Australia. And I moved from there to Sydney. So at the age of 14, 15, I was living in Sydney. I was homeless. And the skills that I had honed at school, I was honing my skills, these aggressive skills, these skills of fighting in the streets of Sydney. Because as a 14-year-old in the 60s in Sydney, it was you either survived or you went under. And to survive, you had to be hard. And to survive there, I used to mug people. It didn't worry me whether it was a woman, whether it was a man, whether it was an old woman, whether it was a schoolboy or whatever. For me, my choice was that I needed to survive. And so my choice was to mug these people. So this is the story of the progression of Michael. The concept, no concept of compassion at all. And this carried on for a few years while I was in Sydney, working around. I used to hang around a lot of really nasty haunts there. I used to do illegal things as well to gain money. Then at the age of 17, I enlisted in the Australian Army. And so another chapter of my life began here. At the age of 17, as I said, I enlisted in the Australian Army. And at the age of 17 years and 8 months, I found myself doing my first tour of duty in Vietnam. And the thoughts that had evolved in me as a child, that lack of compassion, this carried me through while I was in Vietnam. You hear daily in the newspapers and in the radios of atrocities that used to be carried out or that are being carried out today you know, by Allied forces in Afghanistan, and then going back to Iraq. The atrocities that are happening against civilians and everything. I used to be part of that military machine. You know, I can remember in Vietnam, there, to give you some idea of the thoughts that I used to carry. This memory in me here. If any of you were to see, say, a young child, a young baby of about 6 or 7 months old, dead on the ground, and you look down at it, what thoughts would be going through your head? You know, there would be a sadness in you. You know, you would become upset. I can remember a time when we were walking through a village in Vietnam, which had just been bombed by the Americans, and I came upon this same scene. But because I had no concepts or no compassion and no feelings for my fellow human beings, the child was in my way, so I put my foot out and I kicked it out the way. These are the thoughts that I carry. The thoughts that, you know, that most people have about what's going to happen to me or what's going to happen to my friends or anything. I never had any of those thoughts at all, as a, you know, while serving in Vietnam. And my life, I never used to think about my life, you know, what's going to happen to me. As the video just said, thinking about life and death. You know, I had some near-death experiences in Vietnam. And the first was we just had a firefight just out of a place, Ho City. And we were being overrun, so we were being evacuated. And a Chinook helicopter came in to pick us up. We got on board, and at that time, because I used to be the machine gun and my weapon was the M60, I was the last one in, so I was sitting at the back of this, and it was a Chinook helicopter. Most of you see the Chinooks when you see it on the news and everything, the twin-bladed thing. And we lifted off, and you breathe a sigh of relief thinking, right, we're on our way home. But a rocket took out the rear rotor, and the Chinook spiraled to the ground. As it hit the ground, it threw me clear, and I suffered just minor injuries, cuts and bruises and what have you. But the 28 people that were inside the Chinook, they died because 3 seconds after the impact, the Chinook exploded. So I'm sat there and I'm looking back, and people that I've served with, people I've gone through basic training with, they're dying in this machine. And what thoughts did I have? My thoughts were, I'm lucky. Lucky I was sitting at the back. Lucky that I got thrown out. No thoughts about these people, you know. No thoughts about, you know, why is it that I got thrown out the back. And there was another incident that we were walking through a rice field, and we came under rocket attack. And a rocket exploded just in front of us. And the shrapnel was so close that I felt it go past my ear, and a piece of shrapnel caught me in my leg. Just what they call a flesh wound. And I turned round to a friend of mine called Peter Belcher, who I'd gone through basic training with. I'd gone through jungle training with. I'd shared meals with this guy. I'd shared drinks with this guy. He was a close friend of mine. So I turned round to him to make the comment that that was close. But the shrapnel had decapitated him. And again, if we see the loss of a friend, or even, you know, the loss of a family member or a distant uncle, you feel sadness, you feel remorse. I didn't. The thought I had was, I'm lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. These are the thoughts that I had in my head at the time while serving in the army. And this is what carried me through, you know, the 18-month tour of duty that I did there. I saw a lot of atrocities. I committed a lot of atrocities. I've killed men. I've killed women. I've killed children. I'm not ashamed to admit it now. But I wasn't ashamed then that I had done it. I had no thoughts. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. You hear this all the time. When you see on the news, you know, about civilians being killed in Afghanistan, and you see the response from the Americans or the British, you know, it was an accident. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. We didn't mean to do it. And this is the life that I lived for 18 months. So this violence that I had as a child carried on with me through into my adulthood, into the army. To the point that I was, I suppose, a violent person. Okay? When we came back in the army, I started boxing in the army. And the reason that I started boxing is that my commanding officer decided to put me in there because I was always getting in trouble. I was always getting into fights. So he said to me, right, okay, if you like fighting so much, you can go into boxing. And I loved it. Boxing to me was like a drug. If I wasn't in the ring, I used to have withdrawals. I needed that enjoyment, that one-on-one. I used to joke to people that music to me is hearing somebody's bones break. That was music to me. The power of just hitting somebody hard in the face, seeing that face distorted, seeing that blood when you've broken their nose. That was music to me. That drove me to the point that when I left the army, I thought, this is where my life's going. You know, this is what I want. This is it. I'm going to do it. And I became professional. And the same again within my professional career, I thought, this is it. And with my professional career, the money wasn't very good initially when I'm starting off. It's by the time you pay off the tax man, and you pay off your trainer, and you pay off your manager, and you pay off your gym fees and everything. And you pay off the Australian Boxing Control Board. You're not left with a very lot of money. But then a man approached me, and he said, I know somebody that can use your skills. So to supplement the money, because I love the high life, I love the prestige that boxing brought to me. You know, the women that this brought to me. Women would flock. I love that. I love that lifestyle. That where you walked into a room and people knew you. I enjoyed that lifestyle, but I couldn't sustain it. So this man came and spoke to me and said, you know, I know somebody that'll pay well for your skills. So during my boxing career, or the earlier part of my boxing career, I started working for a crime family, an Italian crime family in Sydney, in Australia. And my duties was that I would use that aggression that I had. You know, it would be, you owe money, I'll pay you a visit. You pay the money back, no problems, you get just a quick slapping. You didn't pay the money back, we'll break your leg. That's the sort of person I'd become. I'd become an enforcer for this. But my dream was still that pinnacle in boxing. Forget everything else. You know, my dream was, I want to become the best. I want to become the best. You know, forget about everything else. My freedom was that fighting, that enjoyment of fighting in the ring. That's what I absolutely loved. That was my agenda. Here today, you know, the same with a lot of youth. You think is, I want to get the next iPod, or I want the next Xbox, or that stuff, or I want this car, or whatever. To me, it was the next fight. What's the next fight going to be long? And that was my dream. And that was my dream to do this. And as I said, I had no consumptions. I never looked at, you know, what damage I was doing to people. Women to me were just a commodity. You know, the people that I used to hurt, had no compassion for them at all. You know, just tough, not interested at all. And then came the thing that the fight that was going to put me into the big league. It was the 28th of April, 1978, Sydney Arena. My fight with Joe Frazier. 15 hard rounds. And I drew. And out of that fight came a lot of offers. I was due to come over here to the United Kingdom, and I was due to fight for the Commonwealth heavyweight title as a warm-up to move on into America and move my career on in America. But as anything, when you choose a lifestyle like the lifestyle that I have, it has its pitfalls. And with me, it did. With violence comes violence. With the lifestyle that I lived came the violence, and then came the police. I got into trouble with the authorities, serious trouble with the authorities, to the point that I was stripped of my boxing license, which is a worldwide ban, which was the end of my boxing career. So instead of sitting down and thinking, where do I move from here? My life never changed. My life never changed. I just started to work as what I do, working on the doors, and that. The same again in that violent background and everything. Total disregard for anything else, not looking at anything else. You know, this was my freedom to do what I wanted. You know, to indulge in drink, to indulge in women and everything. So even though something as catastrophic as losing my boxing license, which was taking my dream away, even that didn't make me sit down and think, you know, what are you doing? So what I did is I left the country, I left Australia, and I travelled around the world. I had a bit of money and I travelled around the world for a few years. I ended up here in the UK. And I started working at Kingston University. So I need to move on a bit. So I started working at Kingston University. And it was there that I came into contact with Muslims. Prior to that, my understanding of Muslims and everything was what I heard on the TV. So there I met a load of Muslims. And I just couldn't click with them. So I got a book out of the library, and I looked at the book, and this book changed what I thought, because this book is talking of two parts. It's talking of a spiritual Islam, and it's talking about a deen, an aqidah. So I went and spoke to a couple of brothers who just sort of turned their backs on me and moved away. And then I sort of went, and I finally got a brother that was interested and took the time, and he went through the what Islam was. He went through and he answered all my questions, you know. And even then, this is why I say that my reversion is a miracle. Without realising it, my personality was changing. Because when he started to take apart my lifestyle, instead of resorting to violence, which I would have done, I listened to him, and I would go away and formulate an argument, and then I would come back and, you know, put my argument forward, and then he would take away that argument. Then he went through proof of Quran with me. And then I started to, for the first time, I started to think. And with this thinking, okay, I started to think about everything that I've done. And then I started to think about this deen of what this offers. And I came to understand that the life I was leading, you know, it was incorrect, it wasn't the truth. And I came to understand that this deen, it was the truth. I came to understand that this deen had come from the Creator. So on it was about the 1st or 2nd of July, 17 years ago, that I embraced Islam. So Michael was dead. I embraced Islam. And I embraced Islam with a passion and with a love that I'd never known before. I wanted to know everything, to the point now that my life is understanding my deen, is propagating my deen, is defending my deen. At any juncture, I will defend my deen. I will not just sit or ignore, like I used to before, like that Michael used to. Nothing to do with me. I watch on the news and I see what happens to my brothers and my sisters in the lands that are occupied, or in Syria now. And whereas before, the death of a child or the death of a woman or the death of anybody didn't have no effect on me, the fact that they are my family has a profound effect on me. And I defend my deen. If I hear anybody say anything about my deen, anybody that is a non-Muslim that attacks my deen, that says anything about my deen that is critical or is untrue, I will defend my deen. When I hear people saying, why do you get upset about these cartoons? I defend that. This is an attack on mine, our Prophet ﷺ, and we should defend it. We should defend it aggressively, but defend it intellectually, not with that. And this is why I drink as much as I can. I go to talks myself. I have brothers come to me and we talk and discuss. I look in the books to understand about as much as I can of this deen so that I can defend it. And this is why, even when I do these talks, I always end on, this is why you, the youth, you need to understand. Today, in this room now, if a guru came up to you and said, excuse me, I want to know about Islam, what would you do? Would you be like the first brother that I met? That ran away? I never saw him again? Would you be like the second brother that I spoke to that says, I can't help you? Or would you be like the third brother who is now my brother-in-law? I am married to his sister. Turned around and said, yes, come with me and I will tell you. And may Allah Ta'ala be pleased and bless this man, because he brought me into this deen. He persevered. Takbir! Allah Takbir! Allah Takbir! Allah. This is what you need to be doing. Michael George Vivash is dead and buried. But Haji Muhammad Abdullah Zubair Vivash is alive. And while I have a breath in my body, I will defend this deen with the last of my breath. If anybody attacks any of my brothers here, I will stand next to you. Anybody degrades or talks slanderous about my sisters, I will defend them. I will give my last breath for this deen. But the knowledge that I absorb, it's this knowledge that helps me defeat those that criticize us. So I say to you, you are the youth. I'm getting to be an old man now. All right? It's hard for me to walk around. You're younger than me. You do the walking. You get the leaflets. You go out now. Let me have a rest for a bit. But you need to understand, not just the older brothers, the younger ones like you and you. You need to understand. Put the Xbox away. Pick up the Quran. Put all the other stuff away that kids today watch, and learn some hadith of your Prophet. This is what you need to do. To sit down idly and let people attack us. Let people attack our beloved Prophet, who gave us this deen. Attack our Creator, our way of life. This is not acceptable. So I'm saying to you, my dear brothers, is do as Michael did. Listen, absorb, go to the people that can give you this knowledge, so that when somebody attacks us, or somebody criticizes us, or somebody criticizes our deen, because what you need to remember is, if they're criticizing our deen, if they're criticizing our way of life, they are attacking you, they're attacking your brothers, they're attacking your mother, they're attacking your sisters. And you need to be able to counter that. Because as this brother, my brother-in-law now, Asim, he gave me the ideological truth to the fact that he was able to turn Michael into what I, inshallah, hope to be a good Muslim, and a Muslim that can defend this deen. So So my dear brothers, please take on board, listen to what I've had to say, and inshallah, embrace your deen with a passion, and then go out there and propagate it. And inshallah, maybe you too can bring a few gurus in. Assalamu alaikum, and Jazakallah here for inviting me here and listening to me talk.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
Jazakallah khair, brother Abdullah Vivash. Again, brothers, Abdullah, he went from darkness to light. He was a non-Muslim and he embraced Islam. Unfortunately, we have a situation where we have brothers with the names of Muhammad and Ahmad, Junaid, who are acting like Michael, or Joe, or John. So it's important that we realize that, number one, what our identity is. We are Muslim, alhamdulillah. And with that comes a responsibility. This question that Abdullah has asked, if a non-Muslim, if as you put it, a gore, or a kale, or a pink guy walks into this room, doesn't really matter. Somebody walks into this room and questions you about your deen. Can you defend it? Are you man enough to defend your deen? Do you have the knowledge? And just like a boxer who has to train for a fight, when it comes to this battle, when it comes to the battle of ideas, you have to train as well. And that training is understanding, gaining knowledge, studying, inshallah. Which brother Muhammad Ali, so we've had Abdullah Vivash, who fought Joe Fraser, and in about 5 minutes you're going to have Muhammad Ali. MashaAllah, what a beautiful theme. So inshallah we're going to have 2 more videos, which are going to remind us about the Akhirah, inshallah, and then we're going